Okay, where we are right now is we're in a center of entertainment in the Roman world, and as Francis has been telling us, the Romans were big on entertainment. In fact, it became so big that it was the populace actually expected it. There were, according to the kind of popular thinking in Rome, the government was responsible for two things: bread and circuses, meaning food and entertainment. Now, the bread came in the form of the grain dole, what was called the grain dole. That was the social security of the Roman world. One of the mistakes that we make as citizens of the United States is we don't study history, and somebody said that if you don't study history, you're going to be doomed to repeat it. Exactly. Did the Romans have inflation? Yes. Do we know what it did to their economy? Yes. Did the Romans have a welfare system? Yes, they did. It was called the grain dole. And they had welfare fraud. They had wealthy people send their slaves down and say, "Oh, I'm a beggar," and try and take grain for free. Just like today we have welfare fraud. The system, they never got rid of it. It always got bigger. It was always caught up in government snafus, the whole thing. The other thing that the Romans did, of course, is they provided entertainment, and part of the entertainment they provided was theaters, and some of it was the amphitheaters, the gladiator shows, and that type of thing. And of course, the problem when you provide free entertainment is that last week's entertainment is never good enough. So if there were 10 people killed in last week's gladiator shows, it has to be 12 people this week, 20 people next week. The week after that, they've got to be killed while they're wearing something funny, or they've got to be killed in some way or whatever. If you remember the Old Testament, for example, in Proverbs it says, the lazy man says, "There's a lion in the street," and he won't go to work. Or Samson fought a lion. David fought a lion. Where are the lions now? The Romans used so many lions in their gladiator games that they disappeared from Israel. The lions became extinct from Israel in the gladiator games. Now we're sitting in a theater, and this particular theater dates to the 300s AD. And you can see that, you can take a look and you can see that parts of it are rebuilt, but you can also see down in the front, and if you look around at some of the stone, you guys know what old stone looks like from new stone. So there's some old stone and there's some new stone. The chances are, because Herod probably would have had a theater, the chances are that this is built on top of a much earlier theater, but the one you're sitting in dates from like the 300s AD. Just so you know that. Now, Caesarea is an interesting object lesson. We'll be talking about Paul in prison when we can see the royal palace where the praetorium was and the prison would have been. We'll also go north of the city and we'll see the aqueduct, which is right by the seaside, and we'll look at Simon's house. We'll look in the Bible at the fact that Simon's house was right by the seaside and take a look at that. But I'd like to start in Acts chapter 8 if we could. And I know you all are comfortable in that this is a nice place to do a teaching. And now remember that Caesarea, there wasn't much here in the way of a harbor. There used to be an old town called Strato's Tower. And then Herod, of course, built that up. But if we take a look in Acts chapter 8, in verse 40, and actually, let's back that up and get some context here to about verse 36. This is Philip and the Ethiopian. And in verse 36, as they traveled along the road, they took some water, and the eunuch said, "Look, here's water. Why shouldn't I be baptized?" He gave orders to stop the chariot. Both Philip and the eunuch went down into the water, and Philip baptized him. When they came up out of the water, the Spirit of the Lord suddenly took Philip away. You see that? He was there on the road that ran between Samaria and Gaza, which would be to the east of us and also to the south of us. And the eunuch came up out of the water, and all of a sudden, poof, Philip's gone. And where did Philip go? It says, the eunuch did not see him again, but went on his way rejoicing. Verse 40, Philip, however, appeared at Azotus, and Azotus was the Greek name of the biblical town of Ashdod, exactly. And Ashdod is on the coast, and down a number of miles, and that's where Philip was. But now watch what Philip did. It says he traveled around preaching the gospel in all the towns until he reached where? Caesarea. And remember that he was one of the 7, and he's Philip the Evangelist, and he ends up at Caesarea. What a marvelous place to be if you're an evangelist. You know, one of the things that we learn from the scripture is that you go and do what your ministry allows you to. If you have an evangelical ministry, you probably don't want to move to a little town of 300 in the middle of South Dakota. You know, in other words, when you know what your ministry is, if you're going to serve God, then you move where your ministry can function. And then Philip definitely did this. And look back in Acts now. Let's go to Acts chapter 21. In Acts chapter 21, Paul in disobedience, and we're going to look at this a little bit later and when we get to where we can see the royal palace. But in Acts chapter 21, verse 7, and Paul in disobedience to the Spirit of the Lord is moving toward Jerusalem. But in Acts chapter 21, verse 7, it says, we continued our voyage from Tyre and landed at Ptolemais, where we greeted the brothers and stayed with them for a day. Leaving the next day, we reached Caesarea and stayed at the house of Philip the Evangelist. So here it's been something like 20 years. I mean, Acts chapter 8 is probably 38, something around in there, AD, and by the time Paul is moving to Jerusalem, it's like 62, something like that. So 38, 48, 58. I mean, it's been 20 years and maybe a little more, and where's Philip still living? Caesarea. Because he had a really nice house in the country and he loved it? No, because he's known as Philip the Evangelist. And this, how many people do you think came to this theater? Everybody coming in from Egypt, this was the port. You're coming in from Rome, this is the port. By the way, on a good sailing day with the wind behind you, you could make Rome from this port in 10 days. You want to try going overland through Syria and Turkey? You're talking 3 months. You know, but you can make Rome in 10 days out of this port. So international travelers of all kinds came to see the entertainment. Where's the royal residence? You know, right over there, a couple hundred yards. We'll be there in just a few minutes. We'll leave here and walk over there. So this was the place to be an evangelist. Not only could you build a large ministry here, but you could also send the gospel literally out all over the world. So here's Philip. It says he stayed at the house of Philip the Evangelist, one of the 7. He had 4 unmarried daughters who prophesied there. So, I mean, that's a powerful statement that Philip would be here, and I want to use that to reflect on us and our ministry. When we come here, you know, there's various levels of learning when you study the scripture, particularly when you study it here. And remember yesterday I said the 5th gospel is the land, and what I meant by that, you know, you have Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and they tell us a lot. But the land reveals so much about the scripture. And what do we learn? Just, you know, if you don't know anything about Philip the Evangelist, you think, okay, yeah, he was at Caesarea, yeah, okay, wow. You know, like he could have been at any old town. But what a place to function as an evangelist. So when I come here and I think about that, what's happening in my heart is, John Schoenheit, are you where you need to be? You know, Charlotte has 800,000 people. I'm blessed to be there. I think my TV ministry makes an impact. I think my personal ministry makes an impact. I think I'm in the right place. You know, there's something inside of me that, you know, Charlotte, the roads are terrible. You know, you're constantly caught in traffic. You don't have any of the small town feel. You know, there's a lot to. For somebody who loves the mountains and loves to hike and loves to fish like I do, you know, you could offer me a ranch in North Dakota, and from a soul perspective, I would be much happier there. But I remember that the scripture says there's not a person that's given up land or houses that will not receive 100-fold in the kingdom to come. And you see, the Lord wants us to make up our mind. Do we want something now, or do we want something then? Because it's a giving it up. That's literally what it is. I make a decision. I'm not going to go live in the country where I have my fish pond and my this and my that. I want to live where there are people that I can talk to. I want to live where I can build a ministry. I want to live where I can have a church that has an impact, you see? And so the call from the stone, if you will, is, where are you in your life and ministry? Are you where the Lord needs you? Are you where the Lord wants you? Do you have a confirmation of that in your heart and in your spirit? Or are you feeling like, I'm where I am because it's comfortable, because I like the setting, I like the sunsets, I like, but there's something in your heart that's saying, you know, my ministry is being put on a back burner. I want to encourage you. You will be so blessed to be where the Lord wants you and where your ministry can function. You'll be blessed spiritually and in your soul in this life, and in the next life you'll be in a position to have whatever it is you've given up. If you've given up a house or a land, believe me, you'll get them all back and more. It's a choice that we make.